All right, greetings and welcome to the Game Audio Institute. I am your genial host, Scott Looney, the other co-founder of the Game Audio Institute, and I'm here to basically take you through some basic tasks that we're going to do in terms of dealing with audio inside Unity. Now, to get started, what we're going to do is we're going to do the simplest thing that we can possibly do inside Unity, which is to play a sound when the scene starts. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to basically going to create a game object. We're going to go to the game object menu, going to go to 3D object, and then click cube. And that's going to put our cube somewhere right here. Hopefully you've got nice visible stuff. I'm dealing with the warehouse, scene, and I've opened up my scene, and I'm basically navigated over here to the sort of entryway, which is kind of like a loading dock kind of area. So the idea, though, is that you have a cube, and now what we're going to do is we're going to add an audio source to the cube. Now, what we basically talked about was that there are two components that you need to have in order to hear sound inside the game. And the first one that you need is what's called the audio listener. The audio listener is often, not always, but often located under the main camera object. It's very unfancy. It literally looks like this. It's like this one line you see here, audio listener, right over here. So it's not very fancy at all, but it's absolutely necessary. And most importantly, there needs to only be one of these in a scene at a given time, which is very important to keep in mind. Because many times people will add extra audio listeners to the scene because they don't remember that or have forgotten the fact that there's already an audio listener in the scene. Always a good idea to say search for main camera, like that, and then you get the main camera object inside the scene. And then you can make sure that you have an audio listener present. All right, so that's the first thing that we need. Second thing we need is the audio source. And unlike the audio listener, we can have as many of these as we can basically handle inside the game. By default, Unity defaults to about 32 audio voices available at one time, but it can be increased. Anyway, so we're going to click our cube, and we're going to add ourselves the audio source component, and then play some audio. So we're going to go Add Component. We're going to click the Add Component button, and then we're going to go to the Audio menu, and then to the Audio Source setting. And we have now added ourselves an audio source. So I'm not going to tell you about a whole bunch of stuff here, but we do need to basically import some audio. So we're going to do that very easily. I'm going to go into Test Audio folder I have right up here, and I'm going to open this up, and I'm just going to take in a couple sounds that I like. And what I'm going to do, actually, before I do this, I'm going to make myself, because I want to be organized, I want to basically create a folder. So I'm going to do that and say create, and then folder. That's how that will happen. And my folder is going to be called, amazingly enough, audio. So now I have an empty folder to stick stuff in. You can import folders, by the way, if you need to. That's totally fine. We're going to basically just take a couple of sounds here. Radio static sound here, and a Roger beep sound here. And so what we're going to do first is we're just going to play this sound at the beginning of the scene. So we're going to basically click on our cube again, so we can see it. You can see the arrows kind of surrounding it there. You can also click on it here in the hierarchy if you want to. If your camera's not focused on it, you can double-click the cube, and the camera will focus on that. So if, like, for example, I'm all the way back here, you click cube, and it will focus on your cube. For this testing situation, it doesn't actually matter whether we're physically here or there. When we get to the 3D version, it'll be a little bit more of a thing. But for right now, what we're going to do is we're going to take our Roger beep sound, and now what has happened is that our audio file has now been imported into Unity, and is now considered an audio clip, basically. So we're going to basically take that Roger beep sound, and we're going to drag it over here to none audio clip. And we're also going to click on the play on awake option. So basically what that means is that if the object is already in the scene, it will play at the beginning of the scene. So what we're going to do is we're going to play on awake, and we're going to make sure that this has been set to 2D. So there's another thing to talk about in regards to Unity's audio system is that it actually runs two signal paths at the same time. It runs a 2D signal path, and it runs a 3D signal path. So the 2D signal path has no distance, and it has no attenuation, so it doesn't respond to any of those sorts of things. But it's going to be good for things like ambiances and music, non-directional ambiances like room tone. So we basically have this correct. It's not going to loop. We're going to play it on awake. And basically, as soon as we click the playback knob, or a playback button, which is up here at the top of the screen, it will automatically play back the sound, and it should just work. And there we go. That's our sound. We have successfully done one of the few things that we can actually do inside Unity without any kind of programming whatsoever or scripting whatsoever, which is to play the sound at the beginning of the scene. And this is a 2D sound. All right, so for the next bit, what we're going to do is we're going to look for this radio here. It's called Trigger Stereo. You can just simply type the word stereo here if you want to. But the one we're looking for is Trigger Stereo and not Trigger Stereo Desk. This one here is Trigger Stereo. And so for this, I'll take it out like that. Now that we have it, we can go on again, same way as before. What we're going to do is take out that thing here, and we're just going to basically add ourselves. It's all the way at the bottom here. Add component, and then again, audio, and then audio source. And now what we've done is we're adding an audio source to this. Now we're going to change this slightly differently. We're going to have this be more of an ambience. Actually, it's going to be like more of like stereo static, like radio static that you can get from a radio. And I'm going to basically put it here under audio clip. It's already set to play on awake. If it's not there, you would want to turn that on, and you want to click loop. Another thing to mention, actually, when we start the game, for sure, is you want to make sure that the warehouse manager object has showtime turned off. I'm not going to explain exactly why that is, but just make sure that object is checked off. Otherwise, the game will play in a different way, and this won't be as effective. So what we're going to do is play on awake and loop, but then we're also going to basically make this be spatial blend 3D and not 2D. So it's going to go completely along the 3D signal path. Now, in that case, let's sort of talk about the other sort of stuff we're talking about. So 3D sound settings. So the 3D sound settings that are in Unity, the most important things to keep in mind are the minimum distance and the maximum distance. I will explain the maximum distance first. So past the maximum distance, a sound is going to basically stop attenuating. It means it stops getting quieter, basically. And then at minimum distance, it stops getting any louder. It's just going to basically just max out at that particular volume. Now, what you're looking at right now, you see this blue sort of sphere here. That sphere is actually the minimum distance sphere. So if we do that and we kind of go up, out, and back out really, 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 really far, then you can see that this sphere here is the outlines of the maximum distance that's available in this setting. This is the default behavior of all audio sources inside Unity, which I think is ridiculously large to have 500 meters. By the way, that's meter. These are meters and not feet or anything like that. So we're doing this. You can actually customize exactly what the measurements are, but by default, it sets itself to meters. So I'm going to set this actually to a much, much smaller range of, say, about 30 feet or so, 10 meters. There are a couple of different things to talk about there with regards to the 3D sound settings. There's something called the roll-off. So the roll-off is the difference between the minimum distance and the maximum distance that is available. Now, if you know your math, you'll know that when you do calculating logarithmically, you actually never really get to zero on a curve. It gets as close as possible, but it never really actually gets to zero. So which means that once it gets to this volume, if I pass the maximum distance point, it will actually be at that volume forever and ever and ever throughout the whole game. So I don't want that behavior, so I want it to be like silent. But when I do this, it's going to actually change this curve when I pull these nodes down into the fact that the minimum distance is now controlled by the curve. It becomes a custom roll-off as soon as you do that. You could also do a linear roll-off, but a linear roll-off is going to have a slightly less obviously natural or organic kind of quality. But, it still may be desired. It might be a useful thing to have. But I'm going to use the logarithmic roll-off. And I'm going to also put in my radio static, and I'm going to make sure it plays on awake and it loops. And that's pretty much all I need to do. And I won't explain too much else at the moment. But yeah, we'll just start it out. So by now, now you'll hear that. And then as we go, you're not hearing anything at this point. You shouldn't be. We'll go here. Eventually, though, we'll be about a certain distance away from that. And there we go. So you see what happens is that, the sound is coming from different directions. Right? It actually has distance and attenuation. If I walk to the other side of the room, it actually fades out. So that's an example of a 3D audio source that's looping. All right, so to conclude this video, we're going to actually cover one of the cool things that you can do inside Unity, and that is that you can mix audio. As you know, you already probably see the volume knob on all these different audio sources, and so you can certainly mix things by just using the volume knob on each of the individual audio sources. But once you get enough audio objects, each with their own audio source, each with the volume that has to be controlled, this gets really unwieldy really quick. So instead, what you can do is you can actually create yourself an audio mixer inside Unity. And then you can route your individual audio sources to use that output. Now, I'll put up a little bit of a diagram here. We talked about the fact that in Unity, you actually have two signal paths that are running at the same time. You have a 2D signal path that doesn't have any distance or attenuation, and you have a 3D signal path that does have distance and attenuation and angle and, all that stuff. And so what happens in this case is that the mixer is inserted right directly between the audio source and the audio listener. So basically the signal path is totally preserved. It just runs through the mixer and then it goes to the audio listener. And then finally, that's the output to the whole thing. So let's go cover how we're going to basically create a mixer here. To do that, what we're going to do is we're going to go here to the Create menu and we're going to choose Audio Mixer. So we can do that. It'll be called New Audio Mixer by default. You can rename it if you need to. I'm not going to at the moment. If you double click that, now you'll see the actual sort of setup for the mixer itself. And what we're going to do at the moment, all you'll see is the master output. What we're going to do is we're going to create a mixer group, what's called an audio mixer group. And this will be called new group by default. We're going to rename it into radio. And then we'll also do one for the beep sound as well. Now, in order to do that, I want to actually go back and select master again, and then I also want to hit this plus sign so that I'm making a child object directly underneath the master. If I don't do that, if I had radio selected, I'll show you in a little bit here. I'm going to call this one beep. If I had radio selected and I had clicked the plus sign, you can see that it puts the group directly under the radio object. So we don't want that. So instead, highlight that master object and hit the plus sign, and everything will be at the same level at this point in time. So now we have three, output mixer groups, basically. We have a master, and then we also have our sub channels of the radio and the beep. Now, what we want to do is we want to be able to assign these to the channel. And that's very simple to do. All we have to do is select the object in question. And where it says the output says the audio mixer group, we're going to click that dot over there to the right, and we're going to go and click, in this case, that was the beep sound, so we'll go with beep here. And then for the radio, we go to room B, and we're going to do the trigger stereo. And here it says none audio mixer group, and we'll click that dot again, and we'll go to radio. So now these are actually labeled and also hooked up to an actual audio source so that they will do something. And so what we can do is we can actually, you can already see that the channel is pretty logical. Here we have the solo channel, or the solo button. We have a mute button, and we also have this B, which is bypassing the effects. Yes, you can actually put plug-in effects on this channel. So if you click the add button, you'll see a list of things that you can basically select. I'm going to basically pick a simple one. I'm going to pick the high pass filter and on the radio. And I'm going to adjust the cutoff frequency a little bit because it seems a little too high at the moment. I'm going to bring it down to sort of around like there or so. And now what we're going to do is we're going to play back our thing, and we'll be able to hear our sounds coming through our mixer instead of just the audio source only. So we'll go here, and it'll play the beep sound first, and then we will walk ourselves over to the other part of the warehouse where we had our stereo, and you'll be able to hear that our radio now has a bit of a tinier sound because of the high-pass filter applied to it. And there you go. Now what you can also do is you can go here to the edit and play mode, and you can adjust the cutoff frequency if you find that you need to do some, special whatever alteration if you need to. So that's one of the nice things that you can do, is you can actually edit the mixer while you're playing the game, which is a super awesome thing. Anyway, so I hope this has been helpful, and we will see you again for the next series, and we're going to cover middleware. And stay tuned to the Game Audio Institute for more cool stuff. See you later. Bye-bye.